Great to have you here. You've had one heck of a career. After the Naval Academy, you were a Navy fighter pilot for over 20 years. Then you spent 11 years at Lockheed Martin. And then you ran a telecom company. And then you made the big switch back to aerospace and defense as an executive. And now you're CEO of that company. So tell me, what was going through your mind when you made that last transition?
Well, thanks. Great to be here. Actually, that's a really good question. The transition at that point, and each transition is different. That transition was I had been a chief executive in one segment, telecom, but really I decided I wanted to get back into what I really enjoyed, which was aerospace and defense. So I had to do a mind shift to go back to aerospace and defense. And with that, the folks that I talked to in my network, naturally there was, well, why are you moving back? What do you want to do different this time that you did last time? And Morri, you've been a chief executive. Do you want to continue to do that or not? So there were some challenges in resetting my, getting my mindset right and being able to sell the transition properly. That's what you're doing. You're selling it to the people you're talking to. I had to be able to explain it. I had to be able to articulate why I wanted to move back. So it was interesting. Each time, like I say, different transition.
So talk about selling yourself. That was something we talked about earlier. You said that you had been used to selling your product and the businesses that the service that your business offered, but selling yourself was something still new because before you had like a ready-made network. So how was it moving into actively selling yourself for that new role as an executive at Cameron?
All of your CareerNerds clients are facing the same question. Selling for some people, they don't want to be salesmen. They say, it's not a bad word. It's not, but it is something you have to do. If you're really making a transition and you're moving to something new, you've got to be able to, and let's use the word sell yourself as opposed to something else. In all honesty, I've been working in business development for years. I'd worked in aerospace and then I worked in telecom. I could take my products or our services and I could explain it to people pretty well. We were successful and it was an easy story to tell. But then when it came time to transition and it was about selling myself for the next opportunity, marketing myself, however you want to term it, I hadn't done that. I had never been really put in a position where I had to market myself. And the difference is insert the word I into your pitch. When you've got to say, not just talk about something, not just network with somebody for the sake of networking, you have to get to the point where you have to use the word I. What do I want? What am I good at? How can I help your company? How can I help that opportunity? How can I meet your needs? Because that's really what you're doing, but it's about yourself, not about another product. And that's new for most people.
You're right. A lot of people that I talk to, we worked with investment bankers that can sell multi-billion-dollar deals, but they can't sell themselves. So what do you think, why was this challenging to sell yourself and how did you overcome that?
It's strange a little bit for a single seat strike fighter pilot to say, you're hesitant to put yourself first. But in fact, depending on where you are in your career, it can actually be hard for people, not just to talk about themselves, but articulate exactly what the things about you and what you can provide to somebody else. In your example, if you would wanted me to sell you a Hellfire missile or wireless services, talk about cell phones, could do that all day long. But when it came to, let's see, what do I bring to the table and how can I match that to your particular opportunity or company, or explaining it to your network so they hear it and then they can tell somebody else, I know somebody who can fit that need for you. So it's a mind shift and it's not just me, I. It's really matching what you can bring and what you have done to somebody else's needs. So you've just got to shift the whole thing. And it doesn't come easy to a lot of people.
Well, you did a great job on connecting the dots and helping the executives that you were talking to through the networking process really quickly. And it is a practice. You have to practice it. Getting it down to 20 or 30 minutes for a networking call, you've got many times just one shot to make the most out of it. How did you do so well in terms of getting your elevator pitch down, getting your value prop down, and getting the conversation down where that in that 20, 30 minutes, people knew instantly, hey, Morri's a fit for this, or I can refer you to this other person. How did you do that?
Well, I can tell you, I'll give you a little bit of marketing here. You helped me personally with that because we got together early in the process. And it is a process and it is practice. And boy, I made a lot of mistakes because I didn't think through the steps of the process right. So it sounds simple now to me when you talk about it. First step, hey, what do you want to do? I mean, tell me what you're looking for. You'd be surprised how many people stumble on that first question. Well, when you're networking for your next opportunity, you have to be able to fold that in the conversation. So I had to figure it out for one, and then I had to learn how to tell that story in a succinct, clear manner. You know, you get a 20-minute networking meeting, you don't have a lot of time. They know what you're doing. People know you're out looking. You know, they know you're trying to find the right opportunity, but you've got to be able to really bucket it just right. So find the right process, which you know all about. Second, practice, and then move on and just go into execution. There's nothing like going out and trying it with people, and you'll get it better each time. Each time you give it to somebody, you'll have that elevator pitch better. You'll be able to match your skills and background perhaps more readily to the opportunity or the needs that they have, if it fits. They'll know if you're just selling just to sell, that's not going to work. You've actually got to be able to think on the fly and match you to them. And that came through process and practice.
That's very interesting you say that, because I remember when we started, you said that, hey, I talked to a few of my friends at Boeing and I was really demoralized or disheartened because there was no openings at one company.
Yep.
And then I said, hey, maybe you should zoom out and look at the whole industry and have a broader perspective rather than just looking at people already in your warm network, because most people's warm network, frankly, isn't that big and you don't have the people at the right level. So how did you reach out to those people? How was the process for you in reaching out and getting conversations with those high-level decision makers to expand your network?
Yeah, you know, the process, once I understood it, made total sense. And that part was actually pretty easy for me. I mean, not that I was some, high-powered person, but I had a pretty large network because I had been in international business and working in aerospace and defense for a long time. So I had a really large network. Some of it was warm network. But before we started on the right path, I was reaching out to that network and I was frustrated because it wasn't working. I was doing a lot of things, what I thought were right, but I wasn't executing very well. And the folks that I talked to would know that. I had some very good friends who'd love to help me at Boeing or the other companies. Hey, love to help you, but you need to get straight what you want first and what your skills are and what the match is. The fact that there were no opportunities at a particular company, they come and go. But that's not usually where you might find an opportunity. It's usually the second and third order effects. So it wasn't really a challenge for me once I got on the right message and understood how to network. That actually came to fruition. And it wasn't a first order effect. It was a second order effect. You talk to somebody, we don't have anything at our company right now. We're not hiring, but I know somebody who you might be a good match for. And that's exactly what happened. It turns out that the second order effect was somebody I had worked with previously at Lockheed Martin, who is now out in a position and they needed somebody, and it was a perfect match for just what I wanted to do. So not easy sometimes.
What I hear you saying, Morri, is that you can't just rely just on the people you know. You got to be open-minded to getting referrals to other people, being comfortable talking to strangers. And right now, so you're in this role, you're the CEO of a defense and space company. And tell me about what are the people are always networking with you, right? I think you said you get one call a week or something like this. What are the biggest mistakes people are making? Let's talk about that a bit.
Well, you try not to be too critical because, you got to give back, right? So I welcome those calls. I recognize when people are going through the process, particularly if they're a CareerNerds client, I can almost pick them out. So you got to be sympathetic to that. But there are a few things that that they can do. And I'm not the expert, you are, but you can see it. Maybe some of the times they're not quite as prepared to start down that elevator pitch discussion. You talk to them. Hey, you talk about geography, you talk about their past experience, you talk about perhaps compensation they're looking for, but then really the hard question. So tell me, what are you really looking for? A lot of people stumble right out of the gate with that because they haven't polished it up, but that's okay. The other things, perhaps they don't have a real good readiness to connect their background to the potential needs that are out there on the market. You got to be able to connect those dots. Remember, it's business. People know that you're networking. It's okay, but it's business. They want to fill spots. Businesses have needs. Hey, I don't have anything right now, but tell me what more you want. Maybe I know somebody. Maybe it's the Academy Network or not. But getting your story understood and be able to tell it up front and being able to connect the dots. And then lastly, there's the follow-up piece too. You'd be surprised how many people reach out and want to do that 20-minute call, and then they never contact you again, which probably not the best form. It could be a five-word note on LinkedIn, and that's okay. Just an acknowledgement. That's follow through though.
I like how you bring that up. The follow-up, the thank you is really important.
Yeah.
Let's talk about also the preparation, because you talk about preparing your elevator pitch, being prepared with connecting the dots, having good questions, really understanding how you might be a fit for their company. How did you do it in such a good way that you got that job really quickly? How did you connect
Well, I'll
the
tell you
dots?
what, I didn't do it in a good way initially. Before we started, in all honesty, we got together because I was not doing a good job at it. I was networking, what I thought was good networking. I was tapping my network. I was tapping people I didn't know. And I was explaining I didn't have the right message, so I wasn't doing a good job at it. How I ended up being successful at the transition was just what we talked about. I got the storyline right. I learned how to tell it. I learned how to connect the dots from me to what their needs are, not just what I wanted. And then at the end, the process works. You get those fundamentals taken care of. And yes, it did happen fairly rapidly for me after that. And in fairness, look, I had been a senior executive in defense. I'd run my own telecom company. So I wasn't a newbie at these things. But I wasn't doing a good job until I got down to the process. And you're never too old to learn. I still use some of those fundamental things in that process today. And I'm not actively looking for a new job now. But networking lessons, how to engage on a 20-minute networking call, messaging, and I coach some of my people at my current company on some of the same things. So they're universal lessons, really.
Morri, what role did LinkedIn play in your job search? You were already an active user, but what changed when you started working with CareerNerds in the way you used LinkedIn to engage with others?
Probably a couple of things really changed. One, having the right profile. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need to check some blocks that I didn't understand what they were. Look, today, LinkedIn is your business card. That's fact. I use it daily in aerospace and defense business I'm in, not just to research people, but to prep for people that are calling into me or my company. It's somewhere between a business card and a profile. And probably some of my early mistake was I tried to make it too much like a resume and not about really current and forward thinking. So now, and it gets out of date, you got to keep at it, you got to work at it. But the fact is, it is the standard business card for people today. So I had to work on the profile, the format, and things like that, the technical part. And then I had to work about what I wanted to say. What do you want to present? I mean, it's great to put your resume in, talk about all the great things I did 20 years ago. Not really relevant for what you want to portray on LinkedIn, right? So I had to go through all those learning points.
That's interesting you say that about collapsing and making sure your LinkedIn profile is like a marketing brochure to highlight the best things in your background and what's relevant for the future employer. And one of the things we talked about was collapsing or really making concise the experience you had in the Navy. You spent 21 years in the Navy. Obviously, very proud of that. You were a Navy fighter pilot, but then you had a lot of jobs after that. And we got your LinkedIn profile on the Navy experience down to about 4 or 5 lines.
Yep.
And the thing I see with most people who have military experience, 10, 20 years, is they want to put every single job. But that's not going to be as relevant if you already have corporate experience. Tell us about why that was important and how did that impact your profile?
Well, you got to think about the purpose of what you're using it for. If you're out in a transition and you're trying to match your background and skills and desires to what's out there, you've got to orient your profile for that. I mean, you've got to connect it to the looking forward. It's not a historical resume. Now, there are some people that use LinkedIn and it's perfectly legit where it is more of a credibility sheet, and they're not going to transition. They're in their role. Maybe they've reached exactly what they want to do and they're marketing that. And part of that credibility they need to show back then. And that's kind of the way I started out. I was thinking, well, all these great things I did in the Navy and combat and flying and all that, loved it. Today, it's a footnote, but it is also part of my qualifications, if you will. You don't have to harp on it. You just say there's a small line in there that, okay, strike fighter pilot, combat, that, but each step is different. It's got to change over time depending on the purpose. And you've got to keep it up. I'm remiss on doing it, but you're going to help me with that, right, Tom? But again, it goes back to purpose. It needs to be fit for purpose. I will also caution people that I've seen some lately, even within the last few days, I look up on it and you just quick scroll down. I mean, it's a quick scroll. You go, who are these people? What do they do? Where do they live? And you look and they go, it shows 22 experiences. And a lot of these experiences were 4 months at a time. That is not a good signal to send to somebody who's out hiring. I'm not looking at my current company. I'm not looking for somebody who wants to work for 4 or 5 months and roll to something different. I'm looking for people who want to join the team. So you got to temper you've got your past. It is what it is, but you got to temper what you're showing and what you're conveying through your LinkedIn profile.
I like how you said that, because if you have 20 experiences or 20, more than 20, people only spend an average of 7 seconds looking at a LinkedIn profile. So, I mean, you just said it. You're really glancing at it. You're scanning it very quickly. What do you see when you go to your own profile? Like your profile is very readable. It's easy to digest. Do you think that when someone looks at it in 7 seconds, they're getting a good impression of what your profile is all about? The first 7 seconds is that top part that shows when you call it up on a web page. Mine needs to be updated. Once again, needs to be fit for purpose. When you're a little farther in your career, like I am, the transition piece may or may not come into play. It depends on your personal situation. But that first part that you see needs to be suitcased for your purpose. If somebody takes the extra time, like I was talking about, to scroll down and look at the, farther down, you're giving it a little bit of extra time, which doesn't happen every day. Again, fit for purpose. It's got to be maintained. And you want to do that because, like I said earlier, it's your business card. If somebody just takes a flash for 7 to 10 seconds before they meet you, that's what they've got. And that may be all they know. If you want to dwell down, it's interesting. Before we do some of our networking stuff, I can tell if somebody's read my profile. Because if you go deep into my profile, it'll give you a couple fun things at the end. Morri loves the big green egg barbecue. If people bring that up, I know they've gone in deep in my profile, which is fine. I think it says something. They've spent the time to prep for a networking meeting, right? I think you're highlighting a couple things that really can make someone stand out when they're doing networking. Let's talk about standing out, because you got this amazing job at Chemring as vice president, and then you got promoted recently to CEO. But when you got that first job at Chemring, what made you stand out among all the other people that were looking at that job? It was a bit of a unique situation for the company because they were hiring an executive from the outside for really the first time in several years. And they were spending a lot of time on the search. They really were careful about the partnership we were about to make. Probably what made me stand out was I had the qualifications
but I was able to explain to them the match between what I had done and what they needed. It is about them. It's about what the business needs. You can be the greatest person on the planet, but if it doesn't match their business needs, they're not going to spend time with you. So being able to connect those things is really where it made the difference for me. You can talk about experience and all that, but it gets to, okay, how can I apply what I've done to your particular needs? And that company, when I went there, they wanted to focus on growth for the next few years. For me, that was an easy match to explain because that's what I've done. So matching that up is important.
I can see how you stood out. And obviously, not only connecting the dots, but you had a lot of experience in doing that because you had done so many networking calls. And when you got this opportunity to talk to them, you were able to leverage some of the experience you had in connecting the dots through a lot of networking calls. Let's talk about how those networking calls can help you when you get to the interview stage.
For one, each call is practice. You'll get different questions. You'll get different conversation in each networking call. And the practice you get coming at it from different angles is where you really refine the selling part of it. At the end of the day, you've got to sell yourself into a position that's a match. And sometimes you get lucky and it happens quick. And other times you keep refining, and it gets better and better until the right thing crosses in front of your windscreen. Timing's got some things to do with it. Preparation's got a lot more to do with it than anything.
Well, you definitely executed in a great way, the networking process, and that led to successfully landing this interview and actually getting the job. Let's talk about your mindset in terms of like doing a lot of networking calls. Some people might be frustrated. They think, why is this so much work? I just want a job. But that's part of the process that helps you helps you for your whole career. Morri, how did you keep such a good mindset in terms of always being positive when you're networking? Because some people get a little down and depressed, like, oh, it's taking 50 calls. We always say the magic interval is like average 50 to 100 calls. And for some people, that might be a lot of networking calls to do. How did you keep positive throughout the whole networking process?
Well, I tell you what, if you can stay positive throughout the process, you're a better man than I. It's tough. People get discouraged. I got discouraged. I mean, I'd been the CEO of a company and struggled with this transition. And if you're in a particular situation where you really need to work, you can have those days. The key, though, is go back to the basic structure. Get your preparation right. Get your messaging right. Before you start an event, a networking event, you've got to realize that you have to present yourself in a positive manner. You know, a lot of people in the networking, they reach out to their network. Call it people you used to fly with, people you used to drive tanks with, whatever. They're your network. They're your best friends. Help me out, Tom. I'm looking for work. We'll do this. That's the easy part. The hard part is when you're going to a total stranger and you're trying to keep it down to that reasonable amount of time. Make the connection. Explain, what do you have in common, and then get on to your messaging and of course the questions you're going to ask in the networking call. That's preparation and practice. Not everyone's going to go well. You're not going to get a touchy-feely great relationship with everybody you network with. They may be having an off day. You may be having an off day. But if you go through the process and keep it going, the repetition will get you better and better at it. And that's probably part of it. When it does strike, you'll know. You say that you'll realize all that preparation paid off.
So you said that you did get demoralized or demotivated, and that's normal, right? In any journey, people training for a marathon, they don't want to run every day, but they have to. But at the same time, Morri, I remember we had a discussion a couple of years ago. You said that at CareerNerds, when we connect people with other Service Academy grads, that's like the fuel that was energizing for you. So you actually enjoyed that process, didn't you? Let's talk about that process of connecting with other Academy grads as part of that network that we're all part of.
Part of the basic networking process. Networking is not a bad word. People associate it with selling again, but it's not. Networking is not also just calling up folks and shooting the breeze. They got businesses to run and lives to lead. You're there for a purpose. some of the challenges you get are what discourages you in the process. I keep harping on the process and the preparation, but that's really what it was about. I mean, you're not going to get everything you want if you don't know these people. They're new. It's okay. And it's okay that they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. You have to keep doing it over and over again, if that makes sense.
Let me hit on that point again about the academy grads. Why the service academy grad? Why was that so energizing for you? Because you're the one that told me, hey, that's fuel for my job search. Is talking to these academy grads where you have a lot in common with, right?
Well, you just hit the word. What's the key word there? In common. Part of networking is after you do the intro, it's establish commonality. Key step. Or establish things that you have a rapport about. Look for the commonality. You've got a ready-made network if somebody's an academy grad. You've been through similar experiences, maybe not at the same school, but you've been through something similar, probably served. You have an open book to talk about where were you? Hey, I was there. Did we serve at the same time? And even if you didn't, you have an instant rapport, and that is a gift. CareerNerds focuses on academy grads, and it's a great reason. That is a gift given you in the networking. You cannot just walk up to a stranger in a business meeting, recognize the ring that you're wearing over there and go, West Point, instant credibility. In addition to having something in common, you've got some credibility. And those two things get you light years ahead of the competition. And that's exciting to me because that makes it easier. Hey, I can talk about the military times, even though we're not in the military anymore. It's really a gift in the process. And you've got the right. CareerNerds focuses on that area for that very reason.
I think you hit an important point, Morri, is that a lot of people focus on just two different, they see the world as binary. They focus on their warm network and then their cold network. But their cold network is people they have nothing in common with, just some random people. But there's actually the gold is actually in what I call the lukewarm network. That's people where you have something in common, but you haven't necessarily met them before. And focusing on that commonality, that's really where you can have leverage to expand your network and really grow it. Because it's like you said, it's a ready-made conversation, right?
We talked about networking earlier today, and I'll give you a great example. It's been 4.5 years since you and I started the process, been through a lot. I'm still in contact with some of those folks I networked back then. Call it cold, call it warm, but they were a professional network. They weren't somebody that I knew personally. Some of those go into transition and want to reconnect with me. Sometimes I run into them at events and they say, we met when we were networking. And then some of them have become professional contacts. I can give you 2 examples this past week in aerospace and defense, where I'm talking to folks at other companies, some of our customers, and they remembered me or we knew each other from the networking process previously. So it's not just for business. It's not just for personal. You can combine the two. It's okay.
Yeah, that's an important point. So 4.5 years ago, you got this role as VP, as vice president at Chemring, and about 6 months ago, you became CEO.
Yeah.
Why did the company decide that you were the right candidate? I know they were interviewing people from the outside. What made you stand out and get this new role?
Probably the fact that, again, it's about fit for the company. And the company, if you're not the fit, it doesn't matter. They're moving on. Secondarily, you have to have and you have to show sustained performance, whether you're coming from inside the company or outside the company. Very fortunate the last few years, I was hired to stimulate the growth of the company. We got a great team there. We were really successful. That put my name not in front, but at least put me in the running. Didn't get me the job. The fit for the job, you still have to do. So yes, I was an internal hire to president, but it could have come from outside. It's about that match and the sustained performance. I could match the growth requirements to that previous job. Well, now I'm matching something else, but that's really what did it.
I always like to tell people that, when you're getting promoted within, then What's going to really matter is your performance at the company. But it's very different when you're marketing yourself outside the company to a company you haven't worked with. And so you got to communicate that value prop. So you had both. You marketed yourself to Chemring when you were an outside hire for the VP role, and then you marketed yourself based on the stuff that you had actually already done at Chemring, right?
And to the requirements for the role. I mean, I had to interview, I had to go through panels, I had to do all the things, same thing the outside folks had to do. So it wasn't them just hiring an insider. It didn't, every company's different, but we're a large publicly traded corporation and there's a process you go through. So yes, I was an insider, but had to go through the same process. And it, once again, it's about matching what your qualifications are and your performance to their needs. The needs of a CEO president role are very different than the role of an executive VP for strategy and business development.
How has your leadership style changed now that you're at the top? What's the biggest change you've had in terms of your mindset being now the CEO?
You know, it's a good question, and gets a little personal, which is okay. On the surface, chief executive or president has a particular, impression that it adds. Fundamentally, though, it is a totally different role than one level, a C-suite role underneath it. I started thinking about this, in the military, you command a unit. Command is unique, loved every minute of it. Commanding in the military, depending on the level you're at, obviously comes with life and death decisions. But you're the commanding officer in an organization and in a structure that's laid out for you, that's dealt, and let's face it, you can't control a lot of it. You want to command a squadron, you're operating within a large framework that you can't control. In the private sector, when you're at the top of a company, you're kind of where the buck stops. Yes, there's a board of directors and everybody's got, there's always going to be somebody, the owners you have to deal with, unless you're a sole proprietor. Still have that, but it's a bit different. You don't have that support network out there that sets the structure of the way the company operates. So let me explain. On a day-to-day, you're responsible for your company. Just like in command in the military, yes, you're responsible. But in this case, it's not exactly a friendly network per se that's out there. Yeah, I mean, I've got mentors outside the company. I've got my own support network, but that's personal. In the business world, it is just business. And it's not like being in a squadron. It's never going to be like that again. It's not bad. It's not hard per se, but it is definitely different. I wake up every day and I have to make some hard decisions, which I don't mind. And the impact can be very large for some individuals. You can't turn around and look at anybody else. It's different than being we talk about the C-suite. You can be in the C-suite and unless you're at the top of the pyramid, you've got somebody who's a backstop. You've got the rest of the C-suite you work with. And I try to work with my entire senior leadership team, try to make it as team-oriented as possible. But at the end of the day, it is different. It's a definite transition. And I'm okay. I mean, I did that in a previous career. So doing it now, I understand it. But you really got to think about it because it's not for everybody. And maybe it's not what it's cracked up to be.
If someone is stuck in their job search and not getting traction, what are you going to tell them to get motivated and start doing the right things?
When you say stuck in your job search, that's different than being stuck in a job. Usually, if you feel like you're stuck in a job, you're going to end up in the transition one way or another. But if you're in your search, if you're in the transition and you're stuck, and it happens to most of us, happened to me, you've got to look in the mirror and go back to the beginning and go, why am I stuck? What is making this not progress the way I want to? Maybe it's time to get some professional help, like CareerNerds, quite honestly, like I did. But you have to look back at why you're being frustrated. What's stopping the progress? Chances are you haven't done a true soul searching evolution where you're honest about what you want, or you've done that, but you're not articulating it well, or you're not reaching out to the right people with the right story and the right connection. I mean, those are really fundamental. Usually those are the breakdown points. It's frustrating if you don't, while you're in the middle of it. Why am I not finding this next role? Why is it not working? Well, it goes back to, am I really clear about what I want? Am I telling it right? And am I telling it to the right people? If you follow the process of that, you will get success. We all get frustrated in the middle of it. It's natural. But you can overcome it if you go back and do that self-study phase.
Morri, I think those are all great tips that people can do to really make their job search not only more enjoyable, but more successful. And Morri, I really want to thank you for joining us here on the Career Nerds podcast to share your story about how you overcame hurdles and positioning yourself and really building a network and landing a really great job. Any last words you want to share with people who are listening?
Well, I'll say thank you, one, for having me on here, but two, I'll say thank you for 4.5 years ago when we started it, because you were fairly new in your company. The company was just starting out, but you were an expert, and you've grown your company really well since then. So congratulations to that. Thanks for starting me on the right path 4.5 years ago so I could make that transition and keeping up doing what you're doing. People can reach out. I'm just one person out there. If you're out in the Academy Network and you're searching, you can find all of us on LinkedIn, right? And happy to talk, given the opportunity. That's the way the network and the support network works. You get that credibility from the Academy Network, you get an instant connection, and most graduates will be happy to take your call anytime. And that's generally true. So thanks. I mean, it's been great fun, continues to be great fun, and happy we're together again.
Thanks again, Morri. Thanks for joining us today.
You bet, Tom.